Classic Hardcore is taking over Vanilla WoW with a storm lately. The amount of players participating in this challenge is insane, and with official Hardcore server rumors spreading, I wanted to make a video overview of all the classes in Classic Hardcore. This video will touch base on all classes in Classic Hardcore and present their pros and cons, but it's not supposed to be a deep dive on every class. Each class segment will last roughly a minute or two, packed with the best strengths and weaknesses of each class summarized, and further deep dive videos including tips and tricks for each class is definitely something I can look into if that's something you guys would be interested in. Before we dive in, I am streaming my own hardcore journey both on Twitch and on Kick. You can follow me on whichever platform you prefer in the video description. I am currently a level 36 Warlock on the Classic era servers, playing hardcore and trying to get to level 60, so feel free to stop by and say hello. Considering I started recently on Kick, I will also do a 24-hour stream when we get to 150 followers on Kick. So just sign up, make an account and throw me a follow, and you will see a 24-hour stream soon. Now let's talk about Classic Hardcore. First up, the class that I personally play, the Warlock. Warlock's strengths include having access to a personal tank through the Voidwalker, which can be very helpful in many scenarios. The Voidwalker even has access to an AoE taunt ability, and outside of the usual benefits of having a personal tank minion, if you pull a mob that you don't want, you can simply send your Voidwalker on him, then run away and reset the mob safely. Health stones can provide you with a permanent health potion without needing alchemy. You also have the opportunity to spec into Demonology, and by speccing into Demonology, you get access to an ability called Fell Domination, which when further specced into Master Summoner, will make you able to summon a brand new Voidwalker in 0.5 seconds if your Voidwalker actually dies. So in theory, once you get this talent, you have a main tank and an off tank ready at your service. Curse of Weakness and Demon Armor are very often overlooked, but provide you with insane defensive capabilities, and from level 1 to level 5, you can pretty much throw a Curse of Weakness on a mob, and as long as you have Demon Armor on yourself, you will heal yourself for more damage than the mob actually deal. Having access to Fear, you can comfortably pull more than 1 or 2 mobs at a time, but keep in mind, Fear is a double-edged sword. The feared enemy can run into other aggressive enemies and cause absolute chaos. On the other hand, here are the Warlock's weaknesses. Warlocks are very squishy. Being a cloth user, you don't have a lot of armor. This means, especially until you get access to later abilities like Fell Domination or Death Coil, if your Voidwalker actually dies, things get scary real quick. There are also a lot of mobs in the open world that are immune to both Fear and Taunt, which a lot of people don't know about, and this has caused many Warlock deaths lately. For example, Harvest Reapers in Westfall, they're dangerous, and you also have some mobs in the open world that are immune to Taunt, Fear effects, and shadow spell damage, in which case you're literally stuck doing 2 things, immolate and auto attack. Thankfully, these mobs are far and few between. Now, one of Warlock's weaknesses lies in its strength. You think you are invincible, making you pull a little bit too aggressively. Maybe you pull 2 mobs, fearing 1, and think to yourself, pulling a 3rd mob couldn't hurt, right? Then you pull the 3rd mob, fear him while face tanking the 2nd mob, which is now half health thanks to dot effect, but then the feared mob runs into 2 other mobs while he's feared. Suddenly, your 3 mob pull turned into a 5 mob pull, and if you don't realize this quickly, you will die. Next up, Rogues. Rogues' strength include massive escapability options. If things go south, you can get out of combat incredibly quickly and easily. Having access to Vanish, Sprint and Evasion, you can use any of those abilities separately or combine a couple of them, and you can easily escape combat at pretty much any time. Combine this with being a gnome, and you can even use Gnome Racial to get out of movement impairing effects, and then simply sprint away. Having access to Gouge, Blind and Kidney Shot, you can easily stun your enemy while running away, further increasing your survivability. Now with both Gouge and Blind, you can also keep 1 mob CC'd while killing another one, making you able to comfortably survive even if you pull 2 mobs at the same time. Having access to Stealth and Sap, you can comfortably skip any mob you don't need while on your way to another objective. Now on the other hand, for Rogue's weaknesses, You have pretty much no self-healing options, making you rely heavily on food and first aid. You also have the very obvious downside of being a melee class face tanking all the damage, and lastly you have the lack of kiting options. Especially in hardcore, sometimes you will face difficult mobs, and having the ability to kite is very important. Rogues can definitely kite. You can for example use melee abilities to proc crippling poison, then use thrown to deal range damage, but then the negative aspect here is that every time you want to reapply crippling poison, you pretty much have to go back into melee and hope for poison procs, plus you have to stand still to use a thrown attack. I am not saying rogues can't kite, they definitely can, they are just not incredible at it. Next up, Druids. Druids' strength include shapeshifting into whatever is needed whenever it's needed. Druids are actually insanely good. In the level 10 to level 18 level bracket, once you obtain your bear form, you can comfortably put Moonfire on 3 to 4 mobs at a time, then go bear form and just melt everything down while face tanking. That being said, it is not recommended since it's hardcore and you should try to play safe, but if you care about efficiency, it's a huge boost. You can also use cat form and dash to sprint away if things get scary, or you can use cat form for pure DPS, and you even get travel form eventually. Basically, you have lots of mobility through shapeshifting. Having access to both bash and entangling roots, Druids can also immobilize mobs for them to run away, giving them survival and escape options. Being a hybrid class, they also have access to a lot of self-healing, which is incredibly valuable when you only have one life. All of this combined, Druids can tank, DPS, heal, stun, root and sprint, pretty much everything you would want for hardcore. So, here's at least a couple of weaknesses for the Druid. First of all, you lack the feeling of huge burst damage, which some other classes definitely have, like for example Warrior in the later levels. You also lack the ability to slow other mobs, but with that being said, you do have the root ability, which roots them in place, but will get broken by a lot of damage, so your kiting will be somewhat limited there, but you can also run away with cat form, and then mana eventually becomes a problem. Now, some mobs will be immune to nature damage and nature spells, which also makes them immune to your roots. So, now the class that half the hardcore community is actually playing, Warrior. Strengths of the Warrior include absolutely none. Just kidding. Warriors have a really interesting progression curve in hardcore, or I guess classic in general. From level 1 to level 20, you will feel like you are the weakest player in the entire world, but the higher you get in levels, the stronger you actually become. Weird, right? By level 30, you feel pretty strong, by level 40 you feel invincible, and it just keeps going that way. This is because you scale incredibly well with weapon damage and stats, especially attack power and crit, and you get access to more abilities, increasing your damage output. So your first strength is huge damage output, but you don't notice that right away, it gets noticeable closer to level 30ish. Also, having the ability to tank, no cap, this is a huge boost. So far in my hardcore journey, I've done 5 dungeons, and for every single one of them, we have had to look for over an hour to find a tank. Being able to tank yourself makes it so much easier and less frustrating to find dungeon creeps. For a warrior's weaknesses, we really have everything. Not really though. Self-healing, you basically have none of the self-healing options, coupled with somewhat low survivability, especially against caster enemies, which simply just chunks down your health bar with their casts. You also have very few survivability and escapability mechanics. The only real play you have is hamstring kiting, which you need to start doing proactively, because if you think you can start hamstring kiting at 5% health, I'm just going to tell you right now, you are usually wrong. So, what about hunters? Their strengths include having a pet that can tank for them, basically the exact same as a Warlock, and spec'd into Beast Mastery, you can even strengthen your pet to deal even more damage as well, and you will also have more health. This is incredibly valuable when you're playing a ranged character, as this personal tank minion will keep your primary target at a distance, allowing you to pump. Hunters also have a very low skill floor and a very high skill ceiling. The difference between a normal hunter and a good hunter is massive, especially in leveling, and if you are a good hunter, this is a huge strength. Being a good hunter involves knowing how to use both your mana and health as a resource, using the environment to your advantage like kiting mobs around trees and fences, and melee weaving. Another strength is having access to frost traps, ice traps, and feign death. You have a lot of CC and survivability and escapability options, and you also have both wing clip and concussive shot, allowing you to permanently slow your enemies, so you have a lot of CC available. Now, their weakness on the other hand, needing to keep both hunter pet food and ammo on hand, your bag space will always be suffering. Also, if you feign death for the entire duration, you will actually die. Actually, a fake it till you make it mechanic that a lot of hunters don't know about, and I've actually seen some hardcore deaths due to this lately, so keep that in mind. Next up, the Mage. One of the best classes for hardcore, depending on how you play. Strengths include crafting your own food and water, being your own vending machine, permanent slow and CC, frostbolt for slow, ice nova for freeze, polymorph for CC. Your toolkit is absolutely insane. You also have lots of AoE possibilities through, for example, Arcane Explosion and Blizzard Kiting. You also have Ice Block just in case things go south. You also have one more thing, Blink, which can get you away from dangerous scenarios, and you can basically use it to blink away. Now for weaknesses on the other hand, the first one is being a glass cannon. You deal massive amounts of damage, but you're also incredibly weak when it comes to tanking damage. So if you let mobs get too close to you, you might end up dying very quickly. Another weakness is the lack of speed increase abilities, other than having the opportunity to blink away, and the last one is the lack of self-healing and survival abilities during combat. Now for priests, you will have an incredibly easy time finding dungeons as everyone wants a priest healer in their group. You also have plenty of healing abilities available to keep yourself alive, which should kinda speak for itself as to how important that is on a one life character. You also have something called Psychic Scream, which can be an absolute lifesaver if you pull too many mobs in one pull, as it lets you fear a bunch of mobs in an AoE fair. Keep in mind though, that this could also fear mobs into more mobs, so this should really only be used as a defensive cooldown when you are running away or when you are completely aware of your surroundings. Getting access to a good wand, you can deal massive damage without using mana, especially considering you even have a wand spec increasing your wand damage, and you can also increase your mana regeneration rate and have a huge efficiency rate overall. On the other hand, priests are also cloth users and are somewhat squishy because of that, and they are also lacking the ability to slow down enemies, root them in place, or speed yourself up. You don't have a lot of options for surviving dangerous scenarios, or escaping combat when needed, outside of the Psychic Scream ability that we just talked about. Now keep in mind, some mobs in vanilla will be immune to fear, so keep that in mind. Shamans are actually quite strong, especially in the early levels. Some strengths of the Shaman actually include having access to a shield you can reduce your damage taken, and having access to Rockbiter weapon, you can enhance your melee damage dealt. Having access to self-healing abilities, you can heal yourself whenever you are low on health, and different totems can be used to your favor. The Stoneclaw totem is actually incredibly useful, and can be used like a target dummy and will probably save your life quite a few times. Having Earthbinding Totem, you can slow down mobs and help you run away, an actual AoE slow ability which you can pretty much spam in order to get out of combat or kite mobs around. Ghost Wolf will provide you with even more, lots of movement and mobility, which is insanely valuable. On the other hand though, being a scuffed hybrid class, you really feel like exactly that, a scuffed hybrid class. You are okay for dealing damage, you are okay for healing, and you're okay for tanking damage, but you're not really incredible at either one of them. Depending on your style of gameplay, it feels somewhat slow, especially if you play it safe, but I guess that's kind of the point of it, right? Slow and steady and surviving. So, Paladins are the final class that I want to talk about in this video, as it is the only class we haven't talked about so far. So for Paladin's strengths, Bubble baby. Bubble will save your life, time and time again, even if Bubble Hearth is not allowed. Simply having the ability to make yourself immune to damage for such a long time is absolutely insane. You also have Lay on Hands, another absolute lifesaver, and you also have access to a huge toolkit like Hammer of Justice, healing abilities, Blessing of Wisdom, Blessing of Might. The Paladin toolkit is actually insane for a 1-life character. On the other hand, Paladins feels incredibly slow. It's the auto-attacking machine as it's been dubbed lately, because that is pretty much what you do, you just auto-attack. Outside of Bubble, you really lack the ability to get out of combat. You could Hammer of Justice then run away, but if the enemy has any way to increase movement speed, it will catch up to you very quickly due to you not having any movement speed increase. And that is pretty much it, guys, a quick rundown of pros and cons of each class as it relates to hardcore on Classic WoW. Once again, if there is an interest in it, I could do a video series where I dive deeper into each class, talking even more about their class abilities, their toolkit, which talents to go for, and even more useful tips and tricks for each class, so let me know if that sounds interesting in the comments down below. And make sure to follow my classic hardcore journey by following me on Kick. The link to that one is down below. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you again very soon.